understand the anticholinergic action on your eye, we can compare the actions of a cholinergic drug produced on the eye, like the muscarinic receptor, which is basically present in our eye, is M3 receptor, which is basically present over here. Like if I draw a normal eyeball, suppose this is your eyes, this one is your pupil. So the iris have got two important muscles. The first muscle is the radial muscle of iris, or you can say the dilator pupillae, and second muscle is the circular muscle of iris, also known as the sphincter pupillae. So basically over here in the sphincter pupillae or your circular muscle of iris is present the M3 receptor. Okay, suppose this is your circular muscle of iris and this is the radial muscle. So over here is present your M3 receptor. And what happens when M3 receptor will get activated? Yes, M3 receptor causes contraction of the circular muscle of iris. If the circular muscle of iris will contract, it will take the iris towards one another, so the size of the pupil will be reduced. Okay, pupil is nothing but the space between these two iris. So when the size of the pupil is reduced, we call it as a meiosis. So cholinergic drugs basically produces a meiotic action. Okay, meiosis means reduction in the size of the pupil. And now quite opposite will you expect here in the anticholinergic action. Like what happens over here is anticholinergic drugs such as atropine, it will block the M3 receptor. When M3 receptor is been blocked, then any cholinergic drug or there won't be any parasympathetic activation. When there is no parasympathetic activation means the circular muscle of the iris will not contract. Now even I have got both parasympathetic supply as well as sympathetic supply. Now what we have done, we have blocked the cholinergic receptor, we have blocked the parasympathetic receptor. When parasympathetic receptors are being blocked, then even if you are supplying cholinergic drug, it will not produce the action because the M3 receptor has been blocked. Now when parasympathetic action is not that much dominating means now sympathetic nervous system will take over the charge. Okay, so sympathetic nervous system will get activated, and what is the action of the sympathetic nervous system is it will produce contraction of this radial muscle of iris. See over here, when these are been contracted, it will pull the iris apart, away from one another, and when iris are away from one another means the size of the pupil will be increased. When the size of the pupil is increased, this condition is known as mydriasis. Mydriasis is opposite of meiosis. Meiosis means the size of the pupil is less. Mydriasis means the size of the pupil is more. So mydriasis is the action produced by anticholinergic drugs. Okay, so what anticholinergic drugs will do? It will block the M3 receptor. When M3 receptor will be blocked, then this eye will be left under the mercy of the sympathetic nervous system. When parasympathetic nervous system is not working, then sympathetic nervous system will take over the charge and it will produce the contraction of the radial muscle of the iris and produces mydriasis. So mydriasis is the action produced by the anticholinergic drugs on the eye. One more area is where you can find the cholinergic receptor. Yes, that is the ciliaris muscles. Here also you will find M3 receptor. And normally what is the action of M3 receptor? When M3 receptor will get activated, they will contract. When M3 receptor means the ciliaris muscle, when they get contract, they will more inward and downward. Okay, more inward and downward. When they are moving inward and downward, attached to the ciliaris muscle will be your suspensory ligament. When they are moving more this way, in this manner, then this ciliaris this suspensory ligament will be very much loose. It won't be tight, it will be very much loose, and attached to this suspensory ligament will be your lens. When this threads, the suspensory ligaments are loose, then there won't be any stretch on the lens, means the lens will become more globular and thicker. that means when the lens is very much globular and thicker means the lens will be fixed for near vision. Okay, so this is the action of the cholinergic system. Okay, and what happens when this M3 receptor is been blocked? When M3 receptor are been blocked means this ciliaris muscle will become relaxed. Under relaxing condition, the ciliaris muscle will move more outward and backward. Okay, they are moving outward, they are moving more outward and backward. When they are moving more outward and backward means they will produce a stretch on this suspensory ligament. This suspensory ligament will become very much tight. When they become tight means they are, it means with along with ciliaris muscle only, this suspensory ligament will be pulled more upward and outward. When they are pulling more upward and outward, attached to it will be the lens, and this lens will be stretched. Where lens will be stretched means it is unable to focus at the near object. See, if we want to see near object, then the lens should become thicker and globular. When we need to see a distant object, the lens should become more wider, more thinner. Okay, but what happens when anticholinergic drugs are being given? It will block the M3 receptor over here in the ciliaris muscle. This M3 receptor will be blocked. When it is blocked means it is unable to contract. Who is unable to contract? The ciliaris muscle is unable to contract, means it will be relaxed, and under relaxing condition the ciliaris muscle will be moving more upward and backward. When it is moving upward and backward, along with it, it will pull the suspensory ligament also more upward and backward. When it is been moving, the suspensory ligament is moving more upward means along with it attached will be the lens, which is also been stretched. When this lens is stretched, the eye is unable to see the near object. Whatever near object will be there, it will be looking very much blurred. Okay, so this condition of stretching of the lens is known as cycloplegia. See, the term cyclo is mainly given to the ciliaris muscle. Like for heart, we also call it as cardiac. For liver, we also call it as hepatic. Kidney is also known as renal. Similarly, the ciliaris muscle is also known as cyclo. And what is happening to the ciliaris muscle? The ciliaris muscle is unable to contract. That means a kind of paralysis is been occurring to the ciliaris muscle. So that paralysis is known as cycloplegia. Okay, cycloplegia means this ciliaris muscle is unable to contract. And what happens when cycloplegia occurs? There will be blurring of vision. Blurring of vision. Okay, and there will be failure of accommodation. Okay, failure of accommodation. Okay, that means the lens will be fixed like that only. It is unable to become globular, and after globular only you are able to see the near object. But since the lens is been stretched out, because the lens has been stretched out, there will be blurring of vision. The person will be a kind of blind kind of condition. If anyone is standing in front of that person, he will be unable to identify that person because there will be a blurred vision. And why there is blurred vision? Because this lens is unable to accommodate accordingly. Okay, accommodate accordingly means if you want to see a near object, it should become globular. If you want to see a far object, it should become thinner and more stretching, but it is in a condition of stretched only, and because of which blurring of vision has been occurring. So these are the two actions of anticholinergic drugs produced on the eye. The two actions are mydriasis and cycloplegia. Mydriasis means the size of the pupil will be increased. Cycloplegia means the ciliaris muscle is unable to contract. Now, when mydriasis occurs, when the size of the pupil is increased, if you focus any light over here, means too much light will be falling on your sensitive retina path. When too much light is falling, you will be like you are unable to see properly. Like suppose you are in some theater watching some movie, and after coming out of the theater you are unable to see a sunlight. You will be like closing your eyes, or you are covering your eyes with your hands. And why this happened means because whenever you are in theater, or suppose whenever you are sleeping also, the lens will be, means your iris will be in the mydriatic condition, the pupil will be dilated, and eventually if you look to any sunlight or any bright light, you are unable to see, and you will try to close your eyes or cover your eyes with your hands. So what happens over here is, when too much light moves here, there will be some irritation, some problem produced in your retina, and you are unable to focus the bright light. So this condition is known as photophobia. Photophobia. Now why do photophobia occurs? When there is mydriasis, and in mydriatic condition, when too much bright light moves inside your eyes, you are unable to focus it, because the inside retina is very much sensitive. So it produces a condition known as photophobia. So mydriasis may lead to photophobia, and cycloplegia may lead to blurring of vision and failure of accommodation. Okay, so these are the two actions produced by anticholinergic drug or your atropine kind of drug on your eyes. Now, is these two conditions can be made helpful? Yes, it can be made helpful also. Like when you want to do certain diagnosis of your refractive error. Okay, for diagnosis these things can be used. For diagnosis, whenever you want to test the refractive error, testing of refractive error. Now what do you mean by refractive error? See, you might have visited any eye clinic, and in that eye clinic, you know, the eye doctor, that ophthalmologist, he will see your eyes via some machine, and he will give that some specs with some number. So that giving specs with number, that is known as determination of refractive error. So for determination of refractive error, we require both mydriasis as well as cycloplegia. Okay, now when we are giving mydriatic agent, it will increase the size of the pupil, and you are able to see the retinal area. Okay, so focusing will be proper. Plus, when you are giving cycloplegia, means this lens is unable to accommodate. Okay, means see, suppose if you want to see a near object, it will become globular. If you want to see a far object, it will become stretched. Okay, and if you see a smaller object or a nearer object, the image will be falling at particular this area. When you are watching a far object or distant object also, the image will be formed at this area only. Okay, so near or far object, the images will be formed on this area of the retina only. And why this happened is because when you see a near object, the lens will become globular. When you see far object, the lens will become stretched and flat. So all this accommodation, all these changes is occurring, all this flexibility is been occurring in the lens as such. And if this flexibility is been lost, that means the lens will be falling at this area or this area somewhere else. Okay, now what happens in refractive error testing means, if we make this lens to fail to accommodate, and when this lens fails to accommodate, then we can identify that what kind of error is occurring in this pathway. Okay, and this is actually required in the refractive error testing. We need to check whatever error is occurring at this pathway. Okay, and if you are not giving any cycloplegic drug, means the lens will accommodate, and we are unable to identify the error occurring at this pathway. Okay, so for refractive error testing, we require mydriatic drugs. We require the eye to become mydriatic to increase the size of the pupil, plus the lens should not change its focus. The lens should not accommodate accordingly, so that we can easily understand, we can easily know the error occurring at this pathway. Okay, so for refractive error testing, we require both mydriatic drug as well as cycloplegic drugs. Now one more important thing regarding this ciliaris muscle is, in small kids this ciliaris muscle is very much active. Very much active means it can easily contract and relax. Okay, so when you are testing a refractive error test in small children, then at that time we require a larger dose of cycloplegic drugs. But when you are you want to know the refractive error testing in old age people, so in old age people what happens, this cycloplegia means this contraction of the ciliaris muscle fails to occur properly. Means even if this ciliaris muscle will contract, this lens will fail to accommodate properly, because with age these cells of the lens will become very much thick, or you can say they will fail to produce flexibility. There will be loss of flexibility with age. So when you are doing refractive error testing, you require higher dose of cycloplegic agent in smaller kids as compared to the oldest people. You can say in oldest people you actually do not require any cycloplegic agents, because these lens are failing to accommodate. There will be loss of flexibility of this lens with age. Okay, now, so producing refractive error means for producing cycloplegia and mydriasis, previously atropine was being used. But the problem with atropine is, yes, if we administer the atropine in the eye, it will produce action for nearly 5 to 6 days. Okay, so when any person is undergoing refractive error testing, and if we administer atropine in the eye, no doubt we will give very good mydriatic and cycloplegic action. Okay, but this testing will be hardly lasting for nearly 5 to 10 minutes to the maximum, and after 10 minutes the diagnosis will be completed. Okay, so our requirement was to produce mydriasis and cycloplegia for just for 10 minutes, but the action is produced for nearly 5 to 6 days. That means after undergoing diagnosis, the person will be, there will be mydriatic condition, because of which photophobia will be there. There will be cycloplegia, because of which there will be failure of accommodation and blurring vision. So this is not a good thing. For nearly 1 week the person will be a kind of blind. Okay, the requirement of producing these two action was just for 10 minutes, but the person was in this condition for nearly 7 days, which is not a good thing. So instead of atropine, we require certain drugs which should produce these two action, that is mydriasis and cycloplegia, for a shorter duration of action, for a shorter duration of time. So later on, instead of atropine, home atropine was being used. Okay, home atropine was being used. Yes, home atropine is your semi-synthetic derivatives, home atropine. So home atropine is also a drug which will produce mydriasis and cycloplegia in the eye. Okay, and it has got duration of action less than that of atropine, means maybe for 1 to 2 days. Okay, so for 2 days the person will go blind. So later on, one more drug, that is cyclopentolate, was being introduced, which have got action for few hours. And nowadays a very good drug, that is tropicamide, has been used. So this tropicamide will produce action which may last for 30 minutes to 1 hour. Very short acting drug. So in this short span of time we can produce, or we can do the refractive error testing. Okay, so nowadays this tropicamide is being widely used. Okay, cyclopentolate and tropicamide both are mydriatic drugs. Not only mydriasis, they will also produce cycloplegia as well. Okay, so atropine have got action on eye. Apart from atropine, home atropine and these two mydriatic drugs have got action on the eyes. And what action they produce is, they produces mydriasis and cycloplegia, which is very much required in the refractive error testing. After refractive error testing, we have got one more diagnostic test that need to be performed in the eye, that is retinoscopy. Retinoscopy means we are doing some diagnosis to the retina. Okay, retina is present somewhere here. Okay, now if this eye is under miotic condition, then what will happen? See, for retinoscopy what we require is, we will place a machine over here. This machine is been used for diagnosis of this retina, your rods and cones. Okay, and if the eye is under miotic condition, so what will happen means, under miotic condition only this much amount of light will be falling over in the retina. So only this much amount of retina we can do diagnosis. Okay, when the eye is under miosis condition. Now when the eye is under mydriatic condition, and in mydriatic condition if we are doing retinoscopy means, we are able to focus in this much huge area of the retina. Okay, so for performing retinoscopy, it is more preferable if the iris is under mydriatic condition, nor in the meiosis condition, because in meiosis condition only a small area of the retina can be studied, but under mydriatic condition this huge amount of area is been available for diagnosis of the retina. Okay, so for performing retinoscopy we require mydriatic condition. Okay, and we don't require cycloplegia over here. Okay, we don't have any problem with the lens accommodation in retinoscopy. So the requirement for performing the diagnosis, that is your retinoscopy, also known as fundoscopy, it should be mydriasis. Okay, so mydriatic drug can be used for performing retinoscopy. So this is regarding the diagnosis where these anticholinergic drugs can be made use. So the use of anticholinergic drug in our eye is, it is mainly used for diagnosis of refractive error where both mydriasis and cycloplegic condition is been required, and it can also be used for the diagnosis of retinoscopy or fundoscopy where mydriatic condition can be used. This is regarding the diagnosis. This anticholinergic drug can also be used in the treatment of certain conditions. Conditions such as iritis. Iritis means inflammation of iris. Next, it can be used for the treatment of iridocyclitis. This is inflammation of iris and ciliary body or ciliaris muscle. Next, it is used in the treatment of choroiditis. Choroiditis is inflammation of your choroid body, and it can also be used for the treatment of keratitis. Keratitis is where the keratin is present it is used in the treatment of inflammation of your cornea and also in the treatment of corneal ulcer. So these agents, these anticholinergic drugs can be used in these all conditions: iritis, iridocyclitis, choroiditis, keratitis, and also in the corneal ulcer. One more area is there where you can use this atropinic kind of drug is, there are some individual which have got small eyes and there will be some kind of adhesion between the iris and the cornea, or else iris and this ciliary muscle. Okay, because of the small size of the eyeball there will be some addition of the iris with the cornea or iris with the ciliaris muscle. Now how can we treat this condition means by giving the mydriatic drugs. When we give mydriatic drug, this iris will move backward and thereby there will be reduced adhesion between the iris and cornea and iris and the ciliaris muscle. So under this condition also you can use anticholinergic drugs. So this was regarding the action of the anticholinergic drugs on the eye. Next we will move to another action. So next we will see the action of the anticholinergic drugs on your cardiovascular system. This is the third area. First we saw the action of these drugs on the central nervous system, and secondly we saw the action on your eyes. Next we will see the third area is your cardiovascular system. So basically first of all we will see about the action on heart. So suppose this is your heart. This is your SA node and this one is your AV node and bundle branches of his and then Purkinje fibers. So the place where you will find the cholinergic receptor is, that M2 receptor is this area on the AV node, on the SA node and AV node. These two areas contain or they have M2 receptor, and plus few areas and the atria also they receive the supply of the cholinergic neurons, and they also contains the M2 receptor. So M2 receptor are predominantly present on the SA node and your AV node. Okay, now what was the action of the acetylcholine or your cholinergic drug on the heart is they will produce basically bradycardia. There was, as we saw, there was a negative dromotropic effect because of reduced generation and conduction of the nerve impulses. There was a negative chronotropic action, that is reduction in the heart rate, plus there will be negative inotropic effect, that is reduction in the force of contraction. Okay, now suppose this is your cholinergic neuron which is supplying acetylcholine. Okay, it will release acetylcholine and it will produce action on the M2 receptor and will produce bradycardia. But this cholinergic neuron, here on the cholinergic neuron itself, they have one more receptor, that is M1 receptor. So it is said that M1 receptor means on the cholinergic neuron which is supplying to the heart, this cholinergic neuron which contains M1 receptor, here this M1 receptor is a kind of auto-inhibitory receptor. Auto-inhibitory receptor means whatever acetylcholine is being released from this neuron, it will produce action on the M2 receptor, it will produce bradycardia. Okay, so after getting released from this neuron, this acetylcholine have also got the tendency to take a U-turn and act on the M1 receptor as well. When this acetylcholine acts on the M1 receptor which is present pre-junctionally, in this case it will act as auto-inhibitory. Okay, or in common term or for better understanding you can say it is a kind of brakes. Brakes means M1 receptor when it gets activated, it will be a kind of catching brakes. Brakes means if M1 receptor which is present pre-junctionally, if it is getting activated, means because of this activation of M1 receptor pre-junctionally, it will inhibit the release of acetylcholine. Okay, see, this is the receptor and this is the neuron and this is the M1 receptor. So whatever acetylcholine is been getting released, it can act on the M2 receptor on the heart and it can also act on the M1 receptor present pre-junctionally. Okay, the action of the acetylcholine on the M2 receptor of the heart is bradycardia. Similarly, action of the acetylcholine on the M1 receptor present pre-junctionally is when it will get activated, it will inhibit the release of acetylcholine. Okay, so this is the action of M1 receptor which is present on the cholinergic neurons which is approaching the heart. Okay, so when it is getting activated, there is failure of the release of acetylcholine. Okay, now when you are giving atropine in low dose, okay, when you are giving atropine in low dose, so at low dose what will happen, atropine will block this M1 receptor. Okay, I am saying about low dose. At a low dose, atropine can block the M1 receptor. Now what happens when M1 receptor is been blocked, whatever acetylcholine is been released, this has been blocked by atropine. Whatever acetylcholine is released, it can move to the M2 receptor and it can move back this way. Okay, but when it is moving to the M2 receptor, it is producing bradycardia. But when it want to approach to the M1 receptor present pre-junctionally, it is unable to approach the M1 receptor. Why? Because it has been blocked by atropine. And what was the action of M1 receptor present pre-junctionally? Yes, it acts as a brake. Brake means it will inhibit the release of acetylcholine. But since the M1 receptor is been blocked by atropine, means the brakes will fail. Brakes will fail means there will be increased release of acetylcholine from this neuron, this cholinergic neuron. When there is increased release of acetylcholine from this cholinergic neuron, means there will be increased action of acetylcholine on M2 receptor. That means atropine when given at low doses, it will produce bradycardia. Okay, so why atropine at low doses it produces bradycardia means because it will block the M1 receptor pre-junctionally, and this M1 receptor which is present pre-junctionally in the cholinergic neurons approaching the heart it acts as auto-inhibitory. Okay, in your brain it should come like it acts as a brakes. When you apply brake, the acetylcholine will stop moving. Like if you apply brake, the vehicle will stop moving. Similarly, when you apply brake, that is M1 receptor, the acetylcholine will be stop releasing out from the neurons. When acetylcholine release is been inhibited, so there won't be any action as such. But what happens when you give atropine? Atropine will block the M1 receptor and it will fail the brakes. Okay, like in your vehicle, if you are traveling, means if you are traveling a car, and if the brakes fail means you are unable to stop the car. Similarly, when you give atropine, it will block the M1 receptor. Okay, you should remember atropine at low dose, it will block just M1 receptor, and when M1 receptor has been blocked, it will fail all the brakes, means there will be large amount of acetylcholine release and large amount of bradycardia produced. So atropine at low doses, since it will block just M1 receptor, it will produce bradycardia. But when atropine given at high doses or moderate doses, at such a high amount of atropine, now it will block the M2 receptor. Okay, now when M2 receptor are being blocked, so what will happen? The acetylcholine is unable to produce its action on the heart, and this heart will be left under the mercy of systemic nervous system. That means if parasympathetic neurons fail to produce action, next the sympathetic nervous system will get predominant. So here beta 1 receptor of the adrenergic nervous system is present over here, and it will lead to production of tachycardia. Okay, so the action of atropine at moderate to higher dose is it will produce tachycardia on the heart. So how it is producing tachycardia means it is not actually producing tachycardia. The sympathetic nervous system is producing tachycardia. And why sympathetic nervous system is producing tachycardia means because these atropine are blocking the M2 receptor on the heart. Okay, so atropine at low doses it will produce bradycardia, and atropine at moderate to high doses it will produce tachycardia. Okay, now atropine when given at toxic dose of atropine, it have got action on the blood vessels. Now suppose these are the blood vessels, and in the blood vessels, if you remember, the endothelium contains the M3 receptor, and whenever this M3 receptor will get activated, what will happen? It will lead to production of nitric oxide, and those nitric oxide will go to the smooth muscle which is adjacent to these blood vessels, and will produce a relaxation of the smooth muscle as such. But what happens when toxic dose of atropines are being given means it will block the M3 receptor. When M3 receptor are being blocked, there won't be any synthesis of nitric oxide, there won't be any relaxation of the smooth muscle. So if relaxation does not occur means its opposite, that is contraction. So it produces constriction of the blood vessels. Okay, so the toxic doses of atropine will produce constriction of the blood vessels. Now when the blood vessels are being constricted, what do you expect with your blood pressure? Yes, when the blood vessels constrict, there will be a rise in the blood pressure. So these all are the action of atropine on the heart. Okay, so atropine at low doses will produce bradycardia. Atropine at moderate to high doses will produce tachycardia by blocking the M2 receptor of the heart, and atropine at toxic doses it will produce a rise in the blood pressure because it will block the M3 receptor present in the endothelium of the blood vessels as also. Okay, so these all are the actions of atropine on the heart. Now under what condition can we use the atropine kind of drug means these agents can be used in the treatment of sinus bradycardia. Okay, sinus bradycardia. Okay, so atropine can be used in the treatment of sinus bradycardia. Bradycardia means a fall in the heart rate. Sinus means any rhythm which is produced from the SA node is known as sinus rhythm. So since atropine is blocking the M2 receptor which is present on the SA node, it can be used in the treatment of sinus bradycardia. It is also used in the treatment of partial heart block. Partial heart block. What happens in partial heart block? It is also known as AV nodal block. Okay, partial heart block also known as AV nodal block. So what happens over here is when these atropine kind of drugs block the M2 receptor present on the AV node, so what will happen? It will increase the conduction, it will increase the conductivity and thereby treat the heart block. Okay, so atropine kind of drug can also be used in the treatment of partial heart block. They are also used in the treatment of some myocardial infarction. Myocardial infarction, that too infarction occurring at the left ventricle in the posterior and inferior left ventricular myocardial infarction, you can say. Posterior and inferior left ventricle left ventricle myocardial infarction. Okay, so atropine kind of drug can also be used in the treatment of posterior and inferior left ventricular myocardial infarction. Now you people might be thinking what this condition is. See, what happened here is, suppose this is your left ventricle and this one is your right ventricle. This is left ventricle and this one is right ventricle. This is your posterior wall of the left ventricle, this is anterior wall, and here you can find downwards the inferior wall of the left ventricle. Somewhere here will be your AV node. Okay, now coronary arteries will be supplying blood to the heart. So we have got right coronary artery which will be supplying to the AV node as well as to the inferior wall and the posterior wall of your left ventricle. Okay, now what happens in this posterior and inferior left ventricular myocardial infarction means there will be a blockage over here, a blockage to the right coronary artery, and this right coronary artery will be basically supplying the blood to the AV node as well as to the posterior and inferior wall of your left ventricle. Okay, when this blockage is occurring, there will be reduced blood supply to the AV node and thereby reduced performance by the AV node. Okay, so when the reduced performance of the AV node occurs because of the blockage of the right coronary artery, so we can increase the performance of the AV node by providing atropine. So basically what atropine will do, it will inhibit the M2 receptor of your AV node. When M2 receptor is been suppressed, there will be increased activity of the sympathetic system. Normal activity of the M2 receptor is to reduce the conductivity. Okay, when conductivity has been reduced, there will be bradycardia produced. Okay, now when you are blocking M2 receptor, there will be increased conductivity and thereby this myocardial infarction, which is a kind of posterior and inferior left ventricular myocardial infarction, can be treated by atropine. Okay, so at these three conditions you can make use of atropine in the heart. Now moving to our other areas. So our fourth heading will be action on the smooth muscles. Smooth muscles. So we'll start our discussion with your gastrointestinal tract. So normally when you give or whenever a parasympathetic nervous system is activated, the action of the parasympathetic system on your GI tract will be, there will be increased motility. Along with increased motility, there will be increased gastric acid secretion. Okay, so there will be increased motility and increased gastric acid secretion. And now what you expect with anticholinergic drugs, there will be reduced motility and reduced secretion. Okay, so we call here it as antispasmodic and anti-secretory drugs. Okay, so anti-secretory drugs and antispasmodic drugs. Anti-secretory drugs means these agents will reduce the gastric acid secretion. Okay, parietal cells we have where that causes release of gastric acid. So we call them as anti-secretory drugs when they fail to release the gastric acid. And antispasmodics means these agents will reduce the spasm. This agent will reduce the spasm, that's why antispasmodics. So anticholinergic drugs which are acting on the GI tract, they are also known as anti-secretory and antispasmodic. That means these agents will reduce the gastric acid secretion, plus they will reduce the spasm of your GI tract. Now, this antispasmodic action can be used in the treatment of intestinal and renal colic, also in case of abdominal cramps. Plus, we know when we reduce the peristaltic movement of your GI tract, means it can be used in the treatment of diarrhea. So, this antispasmodic action of anticholinergic drugs can be used in the treatment of intestinal and renal colic, in case of abdominal cramps, and also in the treatment of diarrhea. Okay, now coming to the anti-secretory actions. So when we reduce the secretion of gastric acid over here, where these drugs can be used. See, these drugs mainly decreases the gastric acid secretion, therefore can be produced some affordable symptomatic relief in case of peptic ulcers. Okay, so in case of peptic ulceration, these agents can be produce some kind of relief, but not actually. See, we have got two actions. First of all, it reduces the gastric acid secretion and it reduces the peristaltic movement. By reducing the gastric acid secretion, it can produce some relief in the peptic ulcer. But what about that acid which has been already released in the stomach? The already released acid in the stomach will be staying in the GI tract only for a longer duration of time. Why? Because it is reducing the gastric acid motility also. So when motility has been reduced, that means the acid will be staying in the GI tract for a longer duration of action. So this agent cannot be used for the treatment of peptic ulcer. So another alternative, that is your histamine receptor blockers, can be used for the treatment of gastric acid ulcer, or you can say peptic ulcer. So these agents, as such, they will inhibit the release of the gastric acid, but the already released acid will produce some damage to your GIT mucosa. Okay, so these are the actions of the antispasmodic and anti-secretory effect of your anticholinergic drug in your GI tract. When we are talking about anti-secretory action, we'll see some more thing about this anti-secretory actions. So this reduced secretion does not occur only in the GI tract as such. More other secretions are also being inhibited, like your, what is this? This is your respiratory system, and because of anticholinergic drugs, the respiratory secretions are also been inhibited, and this is a kind of advantage in anesthesia, so it can be used as pre-anesthetic agents. See, we have got certain anesthesia which should be taken by inhalational route, and when any anesthesia is taken by inhalational route, they will irritate the bronchial tract, okay, or your respiratory tract. When this respiratory tract has been irritated, it causes a release of the bronchial secretions, and when these bronchial secretions has been released, we need to clear those bronchial secretion, and for clearing bronchial secretion, we have got cilia over here. Okay, so whenever we are taking any anesthesia via inhalational route, it will produce irritation of the respiratory tract. Because of that irritation, bronchial secretion has been released, and we need to remove those bronchial secretion, for which we have got certain cilia over here. But when you are giving anesthesia, this respiratory cilia are also getting anesthetized. That means they are unable to perform their work. Means there will be large amount of bronchial secretion which is in the form of plug, which will be staying in your respiratory tract, which may lead to pneumonia. Okay, because bacteria may grow over there, which may lead to pneumonia. So we need not to produce this pneumonic condition. So to inhibit this pneumonia, we should give some agents that will inhibit the bronchial secretion. Okay, so in these cases we can give anticholinergic drugs. So what anticholinergic drugs will do, even if you are taking the anesthesia via inhalational route, it will not produce the bronchial secretion. When there is no bronchial secretion, there won't be any cases of the pulmonary pneumonia. So these anticholinergic drugs can be used as a pre-anesthetic agents, because they will inhibit the bronchial secretion. Okay, and few other secretions like your salivary secretions, your sweat secretion, lacrimal secretion, all the secretions are being inhibited. Okay, when there is reduced secretion of your lacrimal gland. Okay, lacrimal glands are basically present in your eyes, which will keep the eyes wet. Now suppose this is your lacrimal gland. which contains M3 receptor, which is responsible for lacrimal fluid secretion. When these M3 receptor in your lacrimal gland is been blocked, there won't be any lacrimal secretion, because of which the eyes will become very much dry. You will feel like some sand is present in your eyes. So that is known as xerophthalmia. Xerophthalmia means dryness of the eye. Similarly, in your mouth, your salivary glands contains M3 receptors, and these M3 receptor of the salivary gland is also being blocked, because of which it will produce a dryness of mouth. This condition is known as xerostomia. And even sweat glands contains your M3 receptor, and these M3 receptor are also blocked by the anticholinergic drugs. When M3 receptor of the sweat glands are being blocked, it will inhibit the sweat secretion. And you know what is the advantage or what is the requirement of sweating is very much important in summer. Say whenever in summers you will be sweating, and those sweating is very advantage for us, means it will keep our body in a normal temperature. But when M3 receptor of the sweat gland is been blocked, it will inhibit the release of sweat, means it will the person will fail to maintain a normal body temperature, so the body temperature will be increasing. So blockage of M3 receptor in the sweat glands will cause an increase in the body temperature. And for this, children are highly susceptible to the atropine fever. So after this discussion about the smooth muscle of the GI tract, we'll see the smooth muscle of your respiratory tract. Okay, so here the action will be opposite to that of cholinergic activity. Cholinergic drug will produce bronchoconstriction. So here anticholinergic drug will produce bronchodilation. Okay, so the action of anticholinergic drug is it will produce bronchodilation. So this bronchodilation effect can be used in people suffering from COPD as well as for asthma. Okay, because it produces a dilation of the bronchioles. And another smooth muscle is your urinary system. Okay, this is your bladder made up of detrusor muscle, and next there will be trigone muscle. Okay, so this detrusor muscle basically contains your M3 receptor, and activation of the M3 receptor will produce contraction of the bladder, and thereby there will be urine output. Now when M3 receptor is being blocked, there won't be contraction of the bladder and there won't be any urination over here. So this thing can be made useful in case of incontinence. Okay, like small babies are there, they will pass the urine on in bed because of incontinence, means they will not be aware of that thing. But sometimes what happens, in adults also incontinence do happen. So to avoiding the incontinence in adult people, we can use these anticholinergic drugs. Incontinence means involuntary passage of the urine, means urine is been coming out without our knowledge, means without our will, that is incontinence. Now the drugs which can produce this relaxation of the detrusor muscle, we have got a class of drug known as vesicoselective. Vesicoselective are the agents that will produce relaxation of the detrusor muscle and will inhibit the involuntary voiding of urine. So the drugs coming under vesicoselective class are oxybutynin, flavoxate and tolterodine. Okay, so these agents mainly act by blocking the M3 receptor present on the detrusor muscles. So beneficial effects have been demonstrated in the neurogenic bladder, spina bifida and nocturnal enuresis. Okay, so these agents can inhibit the involuntary voiding of your urine. And regarding one more thing, the agents that will inhibit, or you can say the agents that will produce a bronchodilation, apart from atropine, we have got two important drugs. Those are ipratropium bromide and tiotropium bromide. Okay, so in this class we have seen since atropine and homatropine, and these two drugs are mydriatic drugs. Okay, hyoscine have got action on your central nervous system. This ipratropium bromide and tiotropium bromide are basically bronchodilators. They will produce dilation of your bronchioles. And rest of the drugs, that is atropine methonitrate, hyoscine butyl bromide, are a kind of anti-secretory and antispasmodic agents. All these drugs are anti-secretory and antispasmodic drugs. These drugs have got action on your detressor muscle. They will produce detressor muscle relaxation. And this anti-parkinsonium is, we have discussed before only, they have got action on the central nervous system used in the treatment of parkinsonism. Okay, so these all are the classes of the drug or examples of your anticholinergic drugs and their actions. Next, we need to study about certain side effects and toxicity. Okay, like even there is an overdose of atropine, it is known as atropine poisoning. Atropine poisoning. Sometimes it is also known as belladonna poisoning. Okay, even in one more plant, that is datura, this atropine is present, so it is also known as datura poisoning. So you say atropine poisoning or belladonna poisoning or datura poisoning, all means one and the same. So what will happen in these poisoning? Yes, there will be same action but in extra, in increased amount, like symptoms such as there will be dryness of eyes, dryness of mouth, reduced sweating, because of which body temperature will be increased. Next, action on the eyes, there will be mydriasis, because of which photophobia occurs. There will be cycloplegia, means blurring of vision, so the person will unable to see, plus there will be photophobia. Next, action on the heart, there will be increased heart rate and increased blood pressure. And next, action on your respiratory tract, there will be increased bronchodilation, which may lead to hyperventilation. In the urinary system, there will be urinary retention because of relaxation of the detressor muscle. So all these in extension amount, there will be, it may be known as poisoning of the atropine. So these things are nothing but many manifestation are due to exaggeration of the pharmacological action of your atropine. So if suppose this poisoning occurs if you consume in your GI tract, if you consume it via your mouth, then in that cases the treatment can be done with the help of gastric lavage. By gastric lavage, we can make use of tannic acid. Gastric lavage is done with the help of tonic acid, and the patient should be kept in dark room. Cold sponges or ice bags are applied for reducing the body temperature. Okay, because all the sweat glands are been blocked over here, so we need to keep the person cold by providing cold sponges. Next, physostigmine has been given so that the anticholinesterase enzyme should get activated. Physostigmine about 1 to 3 mg subcutaneously or intravenously has been given for producing the antidote action. Okay, so these things can be done for inhibiting the atropine poisoning. And one more thing is atropine is contraindicated in narrow angle glaucoma. Okay, it has been contraindicated in narrow angle glaucoma. Why? Because in narrow angle glaucoma, the iridocorneal angle will be reduced. Iridocorneal angle will be reduced in narrow angle glaucoma, and if you are giving mydriasis, means again it will more reduce the iridocorneal angle. So atropine is basically contraindicated in narrow angle glaucoma. So this is regarding the anticholinergic drugs. Next, the very last topic which we need to cover over here is the main use of this atropine is it can be used in the form of antidote. So these atropinic drug, or you can say this anticholinergic drug, are mainly used as an antidote in case of cholinergic crisis. Cholinergic crisis. Cholinergic crisis means when there is overstimulation of your cholinergic nervous system, which mainly occurs due to mushroom poisoning. Mushroom poisoning. Maybe because of physostigmine overstimulation, physostigmine or overdose of physostigmine, and also lastly because of organophosphorus poisoning. Organophosphorus poisoning. In all these conditions, there will be cholinergic crisis, means there will be overactivation of your cholinergic system. See, in mushroom poisoning, the mushroom contains some ingredients which will cause activation of your muscarinic receptors. Physostigmine are the reversible inhibitors of your enzyme acetylcholine esterase. When overdose of physostigmine is given, it will excessively inhibit the enzyme, because of which there will be increased activity of your acetylcholine. Next will be your organophosphorus, which will irreversibly inhibit the enzyme, and because of which there will be increased level of your acetylcholine. So in these conditions we can use anticholinergic drugs as an antidote. Okay, now these cholinergic crisis will produce certain symptoms which you can remember by the mnemonic DUMBLESS. Means in cholinergic crisis there will be diarrhea, urination, meiosis, there will be bradycardia, bronchoconstriction, there will be increased lacrimation, there will be excitation, there will be increased salivation and increased sweating. So when we give anticholinergic drug, all these symptoms will be improved. Like diarrhea will be inhibited because anticholinergic drug will reduce the GIT peristalsis. There will be reduced urination because it will cause relaxation of detrusor muscle. There won't be meiosis because it causes blockage of the M3 receptor present on the circular muscle of the iris, and because of which mydriasis will be produced. Next, in cholinergic crisis, bradycardia occur, and this will be reversed by anticholinergic drug by blocking M2 receptor, because of which tachycardia will be produced. Next, in cholinergic crisis, bronchoconstriction will occur, and by giving anticholinergic drug, it will produce bronchodilation. Lacrimation will be occurring in cholinergic crisis, and these agents, these anticholinergic drugs, by blocking M3 receptor present on the lacrimal gland, will reduce lacrimation. Next, excitation occurs. Excitation occurs with those cholinergic drugs that can cross the blood-brain barrier and will cause activation of the cholinergic activity in your central nervous system. So we can give anticholinergic drugs such as your hyoscine, your scopolamine, which can cross the blood-brain barrier and will produce CNS depression. Next, salivation is increased by cholinergic crisis, and which can be inhibited by anticholinergic drugs because they will block the M3 receptor present on the salivary glands and will reduce salivation. And lastly, sweating occurs because of cholinergic crisis, and this also can be inhibited by your anticholinergic drugs since they block the M3 receptor present on the salivary glands. So these are the areas, or these are the symptoms of your cholinergic crisis or your parasympathetic overactivity, which occurs whenever there is poisoning because of mushroom poisoning or physostigmine overdose or organophosphorus poisoning. And anticholinergic drugs can be used as an antidote, and they can inhibit all these symptoms. So these are the actions of your anticholinergic drugs.